Hello, today we're going to look into how using Python with Copilot can inform an understanding of the fundamentals of music theory. Now, let me first say there are no fundamentals when it comes to music theory, other than maybe sound, people, and a certain je ne sais quoi surrounding framing or whatever. But I want to go ahead and try to give an idea of how you make really basic music using Copilot and Python. So first of all, I want to go over what this is. This is the musical keyboard, and somehow, for whatever arbitrary reason, we start on C and go to C in alphabetical order, but when we get to G, we go back to A for some reason. And that comprises the C major scale. So C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C is the C major scale. Let me give you a good version of how that sounds. Worst mouse keyboard player ever lived. But anyways, for whatever reason, the keyboard has sort of evolved to include some notes in between certain of these pitches. So you see there's a little black key between C and D and a little black key between D and E, but none between E and F. And that's just the way it sort of happened based off of history. But let me go ahead and play every single one of these numbers, 0 through 12 or C. This is C sharp or D flat, D, D sharp or E flat, etc. And that's what we call the chromatic scale. So there is the C scale, which is C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, actually the C major scale, and then the chromatic scale. So how might this sound in terms of looking at the code? Now, first of all, you see, I want you to remember, C is 0, and then again, we count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as we go by each piano note. And then when we get to the next C, it's 12. You can imagine the next C after that would be 24, 36, etc. So let's see how this let's see how we can get all this stuff to sound. So first of all, I want to make a chromatic scale. So chromatic scale, X for X in range 120. We're going to just do the first octave. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Those of you who are new to this channel, you can look at previous iterations of videos and see what all this means. But basically, I have... Oh, don't say that. I have a script setup called playpiece.py. And what that does is that if you do Python playpiece.py and then the name of the file, in this case episode 4, it'll play a MIDI file based on what you put in this render music function. In addition, it'll render it to a file name that you specify and at the tempo you specify as an integer. Render music will then, we don't need to add the tempo. We're actually looking for N in chromatic scale. So we're going to say MF add note, and we're going to say, if we kind of look at this add note method, we have track, 0 is fine, channel, 0 is fine, pitch, N is okay, time should not be 0, durations whole, and 100. So let me show you what the problem is with having time to be 0. Okay, there's actually two problems there. First of all, we got a low, really confusing sound and everything happens at the same time. So what I'm going to do, first of all, I'd like this to be in quarter notes. By the way, I created a dictionary here that had a whole note, which is 4 beats. We're not talking about rhythm today, though. So anyways, we're going to do durations quarter, and then the time, we need to have which quarter note, right? So if basically, a quarter note is a beat, and we want a different note happening on every beat. Now we have the note lasting a single beat, but we want different notes to happen on different beats. So we're going to do duration quarter, and let's see if Copilot will help us here. I think Copilot fell asleep. One moment while they wake up. All right, Copilot said it woke up. I told him how to do it. but let's see if they'll actually be awake enough to figure out what I'm searching for here. Durations. Quarter. So, it doesn't know what it's doing here, but that's all right. I do. Back had a few technical difficulties. Let's hopefully this works. And for some reason, I don't hear anything. Wait for it, though. Only 3 notes. I think what's happening here, so when you look at the chromatic scale, this is a C below that even most keyboards don't have. So it's just kind of making up really, really low notes when you send that to the piano plugin that I have. So what you need to do is to go to a different octave. So an octave is any distance between 2 notes of the same name. It's also a definition pertaining to these notes have the same name because their frequencies are exactly double. Some of that doesn't matter, but for now it's the same name, and any note that has the same name is based off of what you can see here, distant by 12 notes. So I'm going to do something bass note, that's fine, but let's just say bass octave, and we're going to say equals 4, and then so bass note will be equal to 12 times bass octave. And this will be what? Let's see if bass note. All right. Well, Copilot doesn't seem to know what's going on, but I do, so we're in good hands. All right, and so that's almost a full chromatic scale. If in fact, if we did something like 13, we'd get the last note, but it's range 12, so it's 0 through 11. I'm actually looking for a major scale. So the way a major scale is set up, and again, this is C major, is that we have from C to D, 2 notes, and from D to E, 2 notes, E to F, 1 note, F to G, 2 notes, etc. So by definition, we call the space between 2 notes a whole step, and between, say, the C and this C sharp, or 0, 1, that's a half step. Between E and F, that's also a half step. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is say whole step, and that's going to be equal to not that, but that's going to be equal to 2 notes, and half step is equal to 1, right? We're going to rename this to just whole and half because it, it's just easier to talk about. So major scale intervals. And let's see if we can get something from Copilot. Look at that. So this is exactly what happens. So C to D, whole, D to E, whole, E to F is half, whole, half. And that's what you hear music theory students say all the time. Whole, half, whole, half. So now, of course, this will not help us to construct a scale. These are intervals, meaning an interval is the space between any 2 notes. And we have whole steps and half steps here. So there are other intervals. For example, C to G is a perfect fifth, but that's beyond the scope of this. So to get a major, a C major scale, we start on C, and then we go through this pattern of intervals. Now, Copilot, of course, wants to do this, but I want to kind of force it to sort of construct the major scale based off of intervals. Bass intervals. Let's see. Okay, so what this is doing is it's starting with this bass, and then for each of these intervals, it's adding scale -1. It's taking the last, the very last scale note, and then adding the next interval. So let's see if we can get this to sound like anything. So I am going to just say C major scale, construct scale, and we see 0 is the first, is C, as we know. And so we're going to do something a little different. This I, N, and enumerate C major scale. Bass note, we already have to be 4 octaves above middle C. Durations are correct and quarters correct. Let's see if this gives us a satisfying scale. Okay, so that was kind of funny. Why was that off kilter? Well, that's because we were doing durations by N, which means that we're going to be using the patterns in the scale. So if we have a whole step, we're going to skip something. It really should just be bass note plus N is times N is that plus or time? Oh, it's plus. And then I is going to be correct as well. Now, what's interesting about this is 2 things. So say we want a scale on a different note other than C. Say we want it on the note F. We can just provide a different bass. And let's see if, boom, right, F corresponds to note 5. And so we'll just play this F major scale. And we have success. So that's one interesting thing. Another interesting thing about the way this is constructed is that you can actually provide different intervals to create different scales. So here's the whole tone scale intervals. It's a scale that we happen to have available to us in which it's comprised only of whole tones. I did not verify that that's correct, by the way. I mean, it's all whole tones, obviously, but is it enough? It's the right amount of whole tone scales. So let's see. Let's call this the right thing. So here's a whole tone scale. Wonderful. And then we can also create what's called the octatonic scale. And let's see if he'll come up with it. So that's only 4 notes. It's actually a note. It doesn't really know what it is. So it's going to be whole, half, a few times. I think that's right. So a 7-note scale has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 intervals. A 6-note scale has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then octatonic has 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Pop quiz. What does each of these have to add up to in order to repeat the octave? The answer is pretty simple, so we won't even go there. But anyways, this is what an octatonic scale sounds like. Let's actually do this. Construct scale, bass note, not major scale intervals, but octatonic intervals. And we have no bass note works, but we don't add the bass note. So we're let's just say starting on a C in general. Excellent. So I'm going to take a sip of water real quick and I'll be right back with you. All right. No longer feel parched. Got that water going. So anyway, so now that we have a major scale, a lot of music today uses something called a chord. Now, the origin of the chord is long and complicated, going back to the school of Notre Dame and possibly also related to several traditions of droning, not just in the West, but in the East, as in the South, the global South as well. So whether or not you use chords, it is a sort of a Western thing that, has sort of taken on the world, due to globalization. I don't know why I'm getting so off topic, but anyways. So a chord is just a collection of 3 notes, and in general, we'll stick to the most basic case. It's 3 notes, and these notes are separated by thirds. Now, there is a chromatic definition of thirds, meaning a definition of thirds that corresponds to the count of the number of notes in a chromatic scale. But the sort of origin of the thirds comes from the fact that it's 3 notes in a scale. So C, D, E. E is a third above C, and then say we go E, F, G. G is a third above E. There's also D, E, F. F is a third above D. But you also notice one thing is that, say, from C to E, we have 1, 2, 4 minus 0. That's going to be a distance of 4, but whereas 5 minus 2, 5, 4, 3 is a distance of 3, and that corresponds to the difference between major and minor thirds. And that's just something for you to think about on your own. If there's anybody even paying attention to these, hilarious. So anyways, what I would like to do is to construct a chord based off of the scale. So def construct chord, and so we're going to do base and then scale. And we don't need any intervals. Let's see what this is coming up with. So we have base plus scale 0, base plus scale 4. So this is not really what we want. This is just going to give us a chord based off of C, E, G, but transposed by bass. And I think that could be a really interesting phenomenon. So let's just go ahead and hear what that sounds like. Made for I, N in major scale, chord equals construct chord, bass note plus N, that sounds good, and then major scale sounds great. So we're going to go ahead for C in chord. Let's make sure that's right. C, 1 in 100. No, because we also need to do some notion of duration and time. So time will be I times durations quarter note. That's not right, because we also need durations quarter, and then we also still need a volume. Some days Copilot doesn't really participate. So let's see if I got this right. And no, basic Python knowledge is lacking. That's a great sound. I think it would be even greater if you replaced on this line quarter with something like, let's see, quarter with 16th. Shall we do it? Beautiful. Copilot's not working again, so this is going to be all me on this one, I think. All right, so, but what if you notice? There's sort of a certain funny sound. It doesn't sound like Dock of the Bay, or no, and that's not the one. Lean on You, All of You. I don't remember, but anyways. So what we actually want to do is construct a chord based off of the intervals of a scale, right? So we want bass, right? But we don't want scale to, we want bass as an index, basically. So it's going to be major scale bass, right? Major scale bass plus 2 and major scale bass plus 4. Now that's not going to work for a certain reason. And that's because we're going out of range with these indices. We only have 7 notes. So we need to do a little modulo to wrap around. I think this is going to work. I do not know, though. And let's see what this sounds like. Okay, so base is supposed to be an index. So we have base note plus n is not what we want. We want I. We don't even need to enumerate the major scale. Range, length, major scale. Construct I major scale. So that should give us a set of chords. All right, so why is this off? Is that right? Oh, so the issue I have here is that I'm doing this based off a major scale, not the scale that is passed in. That's one issue. And there's a second issue in that when this top note, it's supposed to be bass plus 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's going to be 11, but mod the length of scale minus 1. And this also needs to be scale size equals length of scale minus 1. All right, so it's not the best sound on earth, but so that's each of the scales, each of the chords of the scale. Well, as always, I wish that kind of went a little better, but you know, from this, you can actually construct all kinds of different chord progressions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just get rid of all of this, and we're going to go through like just a bunch of random chords. So first, from random import rand int. All right, and we're going to actually do this. Never mind. Anyways. Step will equal, so we're going to do, so for I in range, let's say 20 chords, current base is equal to 0. We're going to say at the end of this, current base plus equals rand int 0 through 6 sounds okay. So what we're going to be doing, I want to do is choose a different note of the major scale each time based off of sort of addition. And frankly, we can just say we don't even need to add, because at a certain point, if you're just adding random numbers, you're basically choosing random numbers, especially when you're doing this in sort of that kind of dial arithmetic that I'm doing right now. Clock arithmetic, excuse me. Chord is construct chord, current bass major scale. Excellent. So for note and chord, add note, bass note. So that's note plus bass note. However, it doesn't know how to do things in time. So we're going to do durations quarter. And no, it still doesn't know how to do it. So we're going to do times I. And then durations quarter 100. Let's see if it does a bunch of random chords. So that was the worst music on earth, but it was actually music. Some people wouldn't even know how to do that. So my recommendation, play with these concepts. They are really simple when you get a hang of them. Have a good one. Bye.